The wind was cold that evening, and the sky was already dark when she stepped into the human colony. Her feet were sore, her clothes were torn, and her stomach ached with hunger. She had been walking for hours, moving from one street to another, her eyes searching for a sign of hope. But all she saw were walls, doors, and faces that quickly turned away. She was not like them. Her skin carried a faint shimmer. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, glowing softly in the dim light. To humans, she looked strange, too alien, too different, and that difference was enough for most people to hate her without a word. Still, she knocked on the first door. A middle-aged man opened it, his eyes narrowing as soon as he saw her. She lowered her head, her voice shaking. "Please, I need work. I can clean, I can wash, I can carry things, anything, Harry." The man didn't even listen. He pushed the door closed with a heavy thud. She stood there staring at the wooden surface, her hands trembling. She tried again at another house. A woman answered this time, holding a child by her side. The woman's eyes widened in fear. "No!" she snapped, pulling her child back. "We don't want your kind here." The door slammed again. The sound cut deep into her chest. Street after street, she begged. House after house, the answer was the same. Faces, twisted in disgust, voices filled with anger, and doors shutting before she could finish her sentence. Her voice grew weaker each time. Her hope began to fade like smoke in the wind. Her stomach growled, reminding her of the day's hunger. She had eaten nothing since morning. Her legs felt heavy, her throat dry. But she forced herself to keep going. At one corner, she spotted a small shop. Lights glowed faintly from inside. She pushed the door open and stepped in. The smell of bread filled the air. A baker stood behind the counter, busy with his work. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, do you need help? I can clean your floors." Or, the baker turned and froze. His expression changed from surprise to disgust in a heartbeat. "Out!" he barked. "Out before you scare my customers." She backed away quickly, tears filling her eyes, and stumbled out of the shop. The door slammed shut behind her once again. The street was empty now. The colony's lights glowed above her, but they felt cold and distant. She wrapped her arms around herself and walked aimlessly, her shadow stretching long under the lamps. Her mind replayed the same words she had heard all day. "We don't want your kind. Get out. Leave." But she could not leave. She had nowhere to go. Finally, she stopped in front of another door. It looked old, with peeling paint and a rusty handle. She hesitated, her heart pounding. She told herself this was the last time. If this door also closed, she would give up. Her hand knocked softly. For a long moment, there was no answer. She waited, shivering. Then, footsteps approached. The door opened, revealing a tall human man. His face was tired, his hands covered with grease, his clothes worn from hard work. He looked at her without speaking. She lowered her eyes. "Please, I need work. Just a little. I'll do anything." He did not answer. His gaze lingered on her, cold and unreadable. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Her chest tightened. She thought he would slam the door like all the others. Desperation rose inside her. Words spilled from her lips before she could stop them. I have nothing left," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "No food, no shelter. If you don't give me work, I can offer my body." Her face burned with shame. She hated herself for saying it, but she was out of choices. The man's eyes widened. He stepped back slightly, his jaw tightening. For a moment, she thought he might strike her or laugh or call her filthy. Instead, he just stared. His silence was louder than any shout. The air between them felt like a storm ready to break. She could feel her heart racing, her breath trembling, her body shaking with both fear and shame. Would this door close like all the others? Would this man take advantage of her, or would he drive her into the cold streets again? She could not tell. But in that heavy silence, something shifted. The scene ended with her standing in front of him, her fate hanging in his hands, the unanswered question burning in the air. What would the human do? The human man did not move for a long moment. His tired eyes stayed fixed on the alien woman as if he was studying every scar, every tremble, every broken piece of her. The cold night pressed in around them, but inside the doorway the air felt even heavier. Her breath came quick, her chest rising and falling. She wished she could take back her words, wished she had not lowered herself so far, but she had nothing left, no strength, no pride, no hope. Finally, the man spoke, his voice low and rough. "Get inside." Her head jerked up, shocked. She thought she had misheard, but he had already stepped back, leaving the door open. She hesitated. Every door before this had closed with anger. Why was this one different? What if it was a trap? What if he wanted exactly what she had offered in desperation? Her feet refused to move. She looked at him again. His face was unreadable, his jaw tight, his eyes tired but not cruel. Something in his gaze held her still. Slowly, she stepped across the threshold. The room was small and smelled of oil and metal. Tools hung from the walls and broken machines sat in the corners. It was not a house. It was a workshop. She stood awkwardly near the door, unsure if she should sit, unsure if she should run. The man walked past her, grabbed a cloth from the table, and wiped his greasy hands. He did not look at her. Instead, he asked, "Have you eaten today?" Her throat tightened. The question was too kind, too unexpected. She shook her head. Without a word, he walked into another room. She stood frozen, waiting for him to return with anger or with demands. Instead, he came back holding a small loaf of bread. He placed it on the table. "Eat." She stared at the bread as if it were a jewel. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She broke off a piece and pushed it quickly into her mouth. The taste was plain, but to her it was the sweetest thing she had ever eaten. The man watched in silence, leaning against the wall. His eyes softened slightly as he saw how hungrily she devoured the food. "You don't have to offer yourself," he said finally, his voice low. Her hands froze. Shame burned across her face. She lowered the bread, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought it was the only way." He shook his head. "It shouldn't be the only way. Not here. Not anywhere." For a moment, the silence returned. She chewed slowly, trying to calm her shaking. The warmth of the bread spread through her body, giving her strength she had not felt in days. After a while, she asked softly, "Do you need help here? I can clean, sweep the floors, fix simple things." The man's brow furrowed. He looked around his messy workshop, tools scattered, dust covering the corners. His lips pressed into a thin line. "You can start tomorrow," he said at last. Her eyes widened. For a moment she thought she had dreamed his words. "Truly?" He nodded once. "But listen, this is work, not charity. You'll earn your food. You'll sleep in the corner there." He pointed to a small cot tucked against the wall. "And you'll follow my rules." She nodded quickly, her heart racing. She wanted to cry again, but this time from relief. "Thank you," she whispered. The man said nothing more. He turned back to his workbench and picked up a broken piece of machinery. His hands moved with quiet focus, as if he had already forgotten her. But she knew he hadn't. He had chosen to let her stay. When everyone else had driven her away, she curled up on the cot, clutching the last piece of bread in her hands. For the first time in many nights, she felt the faint shadow of safety. But outside the workshop, whispers were already beginning. Neighbors had seen her enter. They had seen the door stay open for her when it had closed for everyone else. The human colony was not kind to outsiders, and rumors spread quickly. "She's in his shop," one voice muttered. "Why is he keeping her?" another asked. "He'll regret it," someone else warned. The alien woman did not know this yet. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion drag her into sleep. But as she drifted, she knew one thing clearly. This was her last attempt. If he had turned her away, she would have been lost forever. And now her fate was tied to the strange, silent human who had opened his door when all others had closed. The workshop was quiet except for the soft sound of tools clinking against metal. The human worked with steady hands, sparks flashing from the machine he was repairing. The alien woman sat on the small cot in the corner, holding the blanket he had given her. It was thin and smelled of oil, but to her it felt warmer than anything she had known in weeks. She kept watching him, her glowing eyes following his movements. He did not speak much. He did not ask her name. He simply let her eat, gave her a place to rest, and told her she could work tomorrow. For her, that was more kindness than the whole colony had ever shown. But inside her heart, fear still lived. She remembered the words she had whispered at his door, words she wished she could erase. "I can offer my body." She wondered if he had allowed her inside because of that. Did he expect her to give herself to him? Would he demand it later? Every time his boots scraped the floor as he moved, she stiffened. Every time his eyes lifted, she braced herself. Hours passed. He finally put down his tools and wiped his hands. He looked at her for the first time since she had fallen asleep. "You should rest," he said. "Work begins early." She nodded, quickly lying back on the cot. But her thoughts spun wildly. If he asked for what she had offered, could she refuse? No. She had nowhere else to go. The night grew heavy. The wind howled against the workshop walls. She pulled the blanket tighter, but her mind refused to rest. Memories of the day's rejection haunted her. The angry voices, the slamming doors, the stairs filled with hate. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She whispered into the darkness, "Why am I still alive?" The man sitting at his workbench heard her voice. His hands stilled, but he did not turn. He listened as her quiet sobs filled the room. He felt anger. Anger not at her, but at the cruelty that had pushed her into such despair. Finally, she sat up, her eyes wet and shining. She spoke, her voice breaking. "You didn't throw me out, you gave me food, but I know why. It's because of what I said." She swallowed hard, her hands clutching the blanket. If that's what you want, I won't resist. I can't, just don't send me back into the streets." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The man's head snapped toward her, his eyes sharp. For a long moment he said nothing. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists. "Is that what you think?" he asked finally, his voice low. She flinched, lowering her gaze. "It's the only thing I have left. Every door closed. Everyone hates me. But men always want the same thing, so if that's the price, I'll pay it." The man stood suddenly, the chair scraping against the floor. She shrank back against the cot, expecting anger or violence, but instead his voice thundered with something else, fury. "Don't ever say that again," he snapped. His hand slammed against the table. "You are not a thing to be bought. Not with money, not with work, not with your body. Do you hear me?" Her breath caught. No one had ever spoken like that before. Not for her, not to defend her. She stared at him, trembling as if seeing him for the first time. His eyes burned with anger, but not at her. At the world that had forced her to believe such words. "I let you in because you looked like you were dying," he said. "I gave you food because you were starving, that's it, nothing else. You will work here because you deserve to live with dignity, not because you owe me your body." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking. "Why? Why? Are you helping me when everyone else turned me away?" He was silent for a long time. Finally, he turned back to his workbench, his voice softer. "Because no one deserves to be treated like that. Not even a stranger. Not even an alien." The weight of his words settled into her chest. Slowly, the chains of shame and fear loosened. For the first time in years, she felt the fragile spark of something she thought was long dead. Hope. She lay back down, her tears soaking into the blanket. But this time, her sobs were not only of despair. They carried something else. Gratitude. The human said no more that night. He worked until the lamps burned low, his face still hard, his hands still busy. But in the silence, the alien woman realized something. This man was not like the others, and maybe, just maybe, this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning. The morning sun slipped through the cracks in the workshop windows. Dust danced in the golden beams as the human man tightened a bolt on a half-finished engine. His movements were slow but steady, every turn of his wrist filled with quiet focus. On the cot in the corner, the alien woman stirred. She blinked against the light, pulling the blanket close around her thin frame. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then the memories returned, the cold streets, the slammed doors, the moment of shame when she had offered herself. And the man's fierce reply. Her chest tightened. He had not thrown her out. He had not touched her. He had given her food, a place to sleep, and a promise of work. She sat up, brushing strands of silver hair from her face. Her glowing eyes studied him as he worked. He hadn't said a word to her since dawn. His silence was not cruel. It was heavy, as if he carried burdens she could not see. Gathering courage, she stood and approached slowly. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice soft. He glanced at her, then pointed toward a shelf stacked with scattered tools. "Start by putting those in order. Wrenches together, hammers together. Keep the small things separate." She nodded, quickly, relief washing over her. She had asked for work, and now he was giving it. Not out of pity, but because he meant it. She picked up the first tool, her hand still trembling slightly, and began. For hours, they worked in silence. She cleaned. The dust sorted the shelves, swept the floor. He repaired the engine, sparks flying as he welded pieces together. Slowly, the workshop began to look less like a mess and more like a place of order. As the sun climbed higher, she glanced at him again. "Why do you live alone?" she asked carefully. He did not look up. "Because it's easier that way." She frowned. "Easier?" "People talk less," he said simply. His voice carried no anger, only tired truth. Her heart sank. She knew those words well. She too had been living in silence, alone, because the world had pushed her into it. Before she could reply, heavy footsteps echoed outside. She stiffened. The man looked up, frowning. The door swung open and two figures stepped inside. Colony officials, both wearing dark uniforms with silver bands on their arms. Their eyes locked onto the alien woman instantly. "What is this?" one of them demanded. "Why is she here?" The woman froze, fear rising in her chest. She knew what was coming. Humans in uniforms had thrown her out before. They would do it again. The mechanic wiped his hands calmly, but his jaw tightened. "She's working here," he said. The official sneered. "Working? She doesn't belong in this colony. You know the rules. No outsiders, no aliens. Send her away." Her heart pounded. She gripped the broom handle in her hands as if it could anchor her. She wanted to speak, to beg again, but the words stuck in her throat. The human stood, his tall frame casting a shadow across the room. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly. The second official stepped forward. "Don't be a fool, people are already talking. They say you've taken her in for unclean reasons." His eyes flicked toward her with open disgust. Her face burned with shame. She lowered her head, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. But the man did not flinch. "People can say what they like. She works here now. She's under my roof, under my rules. That makes her my responsibility." The officials exchanged glances. The first one sneered. "You'll regret this. The colony doesn't protect those who break tradition. If you keep her, you'll face the council." "Then I'll face them," the man said, his voice steady. The silence stretched. The officials turned sharply and stormed out, slamming the door behind them. The woman stood frozen, her hands clutching the broom so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Her heart raced with fear, but also with something else. Shock. He had defended her. When the silence finally broke, she whispered, Why would you do that?" They could punish you. They could take everything from you. He turned back to his workbench, his shoulders tense. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply, her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever risked anything for her before. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, she whispered, "You are not like the others." He didn't reply, but she saw his hand pause for a moment on the machine, as if her words had reached him. That night, when the lamps burned low and the workshop was quiet again, she lay awake on the cot. Fear twisted inside her. Fear of what the colony might do. Fear of the whispers outside. But above that, fear was something new. For the first time in her broken life, someone had chosen to stand beside her. The workshop smelled of oil and iron, but for the alien woman it had begun to smell like safety. Days passed slowly, each one different from the dark nights she had spent out on the streets. She swept the floors, polished the tools, organized the shelves, and sometimes even helped with small parts of the machines. The human man barely spoke, yet every word from him carried weight. He gave short instructions, nodded when she did well, and sometimes left bread or soup for her without a word. His silence was not cold. It was steady, like a wall she could lean against. But outside the workshop, the whispers grew louder. Neighbors passed by, their eyes sharp and judging. She often heard voices beyond the door. Why is he keeping her? He'll bring trouble on himself. She's nothing but a burden. Each word stung, but she forced herself to keep working. Still, the memories they stirred refused to fade. One evening, after finishing the day's work, she sat by the corner of the workshop, staring at the flickering lamp. The human was still at his workbench, tightening bolts on a machine part. Her chest tightened with unspoken weight. She had tried to stay quiet, to bury the shadows of her past. But the more she stayed, the more she felt he deserved to know. She took a shaky breath. Do you want to know why no one will take me in?" The man didn't look up. "It's not my business." Her lips trembled. "But you should know. Because if they come for me, if they punish you too, it will be because of what I carry. This time." He raised his eyes. His gaze was calm but sharp, as if he was measuring her words. He didn't ask, but his silence gave her permission to continue. She gripped the blanket around her shoulders. "I was not always like this. I was part of a clan, respected, proud. I had a family, a child." Her voice cracked on the last word. She lowered her eyes, blinking rapidly as memories surfaced. There was a raid. Not humans, others. Enemies. They burned our home, destroyed everything. I tried to protect my child, but... Her breath hitched. I lost her. I searched for days, weeks. But she was gone. The human's hand stilled. His face did not change, but his eyes darkened. "After that," she continued, her voice shaking, "my clan rejected me. They said I was cursed, that no mother who fails deserves to be called one. They cast me out, and when I came here to humans, they only saw a beggar, a burden, a stranger who didn't belong." Her body trembled as the words poured out. "That is why every door closed. That is why I have nothing left. Because I am broken, because I am unwanted." The silence that followed was heavy. She sat frozen, waiting for him to speak, to confirm what she feared, that he too would see her as worthless once he knew. But the man only said in a steady voice, "You lost someone. That doesn't make you cursed. That makes you like the rest of us." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "Like you?" He nodded slowly. "Everyone loses someone. Family, friends. War takes more than it gives. But the ones left behind, they're not cursed. They're survivors." Her throat tightened. Tears burned her eyes, but for the first time they were not only of pain, they carried a strange, fragile warmth. Still, fear gnawed at her. "But the others, they will never see me that way. To them, I will always be cursed." The man leaned forward slightly, his gaze unflinching. "Then stop caring what they see. You work here. You live here. What matters is what you choose to be, not what they whisper. Her heart pounded. His words wrapped around her like unseen armor. For years, she had carried shame, as if it was carved into her skin. But now, for the first time, someone told her it was not truth, it was just a wound. Before she could reply, a sharp knock rattled the workshop door. Both of them froze. The knock came again, harder. The human set down his tool and stood. His face was grim. "Stay here," he said firmly. Fear twisted inside her. She knew that knock. It was the sound of authority, of trouble. The door creaked open and a shadow fell across the workshop floor. Voices carried in. "We warned you. The council has made its decision. She cannot stay here." The woman's chest tightened, her breath caught. The safety she had found was slipping from her hands. The human stood in the doorway, blocking their view of her. His voice was low but unshakable. "Then you'll have to take her from me." The room filled with silence, and in that silence the shadows of her past collided with the storm of her present. The human stood tall at the workshop door, blocking the two officials who had returned. His arms were folded, his shoulders broad, and his voice was steady when he spoke. "You're not taking her," he said. The first official's lip curled. "You think you can defy the council? We gave you warnings. She's an outcast. She brings danger." The woman, sitting on the cot, clutched the blanket around her trembling body. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought they could hear it. She wanted to shout, to beg the man not to risk himself for her, but the words stuck in her throat. The second official stepped forward. "If you keep her, you'll lose your rights in this colony. No protection, no supplies, no customers. You'll be alone." The man's jaw tightened. "I've been alone before," he said. "I can manage." The officials exchanged a look. The first one spat on the ground. "Fool! She isn't worth it. When trouble comes, don't say we didn't warn you." They turned and left, their boots striking hard against the stone road outside. The door slammed shut. Silence filled the workshop. The woman rose slowly to her feet, her hands shaking. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "They will punish you." "You'll lose everything." The man turned toward her. His face was unreadable, his voice low. "Because you don't deserve to be thrown out again. Not while I can stop it." Her chest tightened and tears stung her eyes. She pressed her hands together, trembling. "I don't understand you. Every human hates me. Every door closed. Why are you different?" He paused, then said, "Because once I was the one on the outside." She blinked, stunned. For the first time, he had revealed something about himself. But before she could ask more, he picked up his tools again, as if the moment had never happened. That night, the colony whispered louder than ever. Neighbors pointed at the workshop, their eyes filled with suspicion. Children were pulled away from the street when they saw her shadow through the window. Inside, she could feel the pressure building. The man didn't show fear, but she could see the weight in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. The world outside was turning against them both. She couldn't sleep. She sat up on the cot, watching the dim glow of the workshop lamp. Finally, she spoke into the silence. "You will lose everything because of me." He didn't look up. "Maybe." Her voice broke. "Then let me go. It's better if I leave. They'll stop blaming you." At that, he set his tool down hard, the clang echoing. He turned to her, his eyes sharp. "Is that what you want? To go back to the streets? To freeze and starve until someone finds your body in the gutter?" She shook her head, tears slipping down her face. "No, but I don't want to destroy you." He stepped closer, his voice steady, firm. "Listen, I made my choice. I'm not keeping you out of pity. I'm keeping you because I see something the rest of them don't." Her breath caught. "What do you see?" He held her gaze. "Someone worth saving." The words struck her like lightning. For a moment she could not breathe. Her hands covered her mouth as sobs shook her. No one had ever spoken of her that way, not her clan, not the humans, not anyone. The man placed a hand on the table, steady and sure. If you stay, you'll work. You'll earn. You'll stand. But you'll never again offer yourself like you're worthless. Do you understand? She nodded through her tears. Yes. The silence stretched, but it was different now. Heavy, but filled with something unspoken. Trust. Days passed, and the test of trust grew harder. Customers stopped coming to his workshop. Supplies cost more. People muttered insults as they walked by. One afternoon, a rock shattered the workshop window. She gasped, rushing to clean the broken glass, her hands bleeding from the sharp edges. The man grabbed her wrist gently, pulling the shards away. His voice was firm. Leave it, I'll fix it. Her eyes filled with tears again. They hate me so much. They fear what they don't understand, he said. But let them. I'm not letting them decide for me. For the first time, she smiled faintly through her tears. It was small, fragile, but real. That night, as she lay on the cot, she whispered into the darkness, "You chose me. Now, I must choose too." She knew the test was not just his, it was hers as well. To believe she was more than her shame. To trust the human who had risked everything for her. The storm outside was growing, but in the quiet of the workshop, a bond stronger than fear was being forged. The workshop stood like a lonely island in the colony. Days had turned into weeks, and each one had tested the human man and the alien woman. Customers avoided his shop, supplies became harder to buy, and whispers grew sharper every time she was seen at his side. But inside those four walls, something else was happening. The woman, once weak and trembling, now stood straighter. Her hands, once shaky, worked with surprising skill. She could polish metal until it shone, repair small parts with patience, and even laugh softly when he dropped a tool in frustration. She had begun to change, and so had he. One evening, when the sun bled red across the sky, she stood by the doorway, watching the colony. Children played in the distance, but their mothers pulled them away when they saw her. She lowered her gaze, her heart aching. The human joined her, wiping grease from his hands. "Don't mind them," he said quietly. She shook her head. "They will never stop hating me." He studied her for a long moment. "Maybe not. But does it matter?" She turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with doubt. "How can it not matter? Their hate takes everything from you, your business, your peace, your future." His voice was calm but firm. "A future built on their approval is no future at all. I'd rather stand with one truth than 1,000 lies." Her chest tightened. She had never heard words like that before. Slowly, she whispered, "You gave me back my life." For a moment, silence filled the air. His eyes met hers, and though he said nothing, the weight of his gaze was enough. The next day, the test arrived. The colony council came in person, 3 elders with stern faces and sharp voices. A small crowd gathered outside the workshop, eager to see the confrontation. The eldest stepped forward. "We warned you, she does not belong here. For the safety of the colony, she must leave." The human wiped his hands calmly and stood between them and the woman. "She works here. She earns her food. She is under my roof. That makes her part of this place." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The elder's eyes narrowed. "If you keep her, you will be cast out. No supplies, no trade, no protection." The human's voice was steady. "So be it." Gasps rose from the crowd. The alien woman felt her knees weaken. She clutched the edge of the table, whispering, "No, don't do this for me." But the man's eyes never left the council. "I made my choice." The elders turned, their faces like stone. "Then you are no longer of us." The crowd dispersed slowly, their whispers sharper than knives. The workshop was now an exile's home. That night, silence hung heavy between them. The woman sat on the cot, her eyes burning with tears. "You've lost everything. Because of me." He looked at her across the workshop. "Not everything," he said. Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He walked closer, his voice low. "I lost the colony. But I gained you. The words struck her like lightning. Her tears spilled freely. She shook her head, whispering, "You don't understand. I am broken. I have nothing to give." He crouched before her, his eyes unflinching. "Then we are the same. I was broken too. But maybe, together, we can start again." Her hands trembled as he held out his rough, grease-stained hand. For a long moment, she stared at it. Then slowly she placed her delicate fingers in his. It was the first time she had chosen to trust, not out of desperation but out of hope. Days turned into weeks again, and though life was harder, it was also brighter. The workshop no longer had the colony's support, but travelers passing through often stopped when they saw the man and the alien woman working together. Her strange skill with machines drew attention, and soon their little shop found a new kind of customer. Outsiders like her, wanderers, people who had nowhere else to belong. Together, they built something the colony could never understand. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the workshop, she whispered, "I once begged for work. I once begged for food. I even begged for death. But now, I only beg for one thing." He glanced at her. "What is it?" She smiled softly, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "That you never send me away." His lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "That will never happen." And so the story of the alien woman who was rejected by every door ended not with despair, but with a new beginning. She no longer lived as a beggar, a burden, or a curse. She lived with dignity, with strength, and with someone who saw her worth when no one else did. And for the human man, once alone and forgotten, he too had found something he didn't know he was searching for, a reason to fight and someone to fight for. Together, they faced the world not as broken pieces, but as survivors, who had chosen each other, and that choice was stronger than any counsel, any whisper, or any closed door.